Happy Monday, everyone. I'm Rochelle Wilhite, designated broker of Best Choice Realty. Tonight, we're going to be covering buyer and seller hacks for a changing market. I don't think we've totally changed, but we are moving in a changed direction. So we do have to think differently. And tonight, we're going to go over some of the things that I would consider right now as we're moving in a different direction. So it kind of feels like whiplash for some of you who may have not been in the industry, or maybe you feel like it might be a different type of whiplash if you have been like me and you've worked in 2008. It's a different type of change. So we want to be prepared for it. We want to know some top hacks or things that have worked in the past. So tonight we're going to go over a few ideas that might spark your interest or give you some additional talking points when you're conversing with either a buyer or a seller. So I've got about 10 slides tonight and certainly have some time to answer questions. So if you want to pose a question to the group, we are using the chat feature down below on your Zoom screen if you want to use that. We have muted the lines to keep the process moving forward. But if you do have a specific question, just shoot a quick message on the chat and we'll have time to go over that. Let's see, any other housekeeping, Shannon? I think we're good. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so I'm starting to see a lot of people commenting on social media or posing different things on social media or emails. I'm getting probably about 20 emails a day of various things like interest rates are changing. It's not a recession. There's a lot of noise out there. And so what I really want to bring your attention to is just some common themes that you probably want to keep your clients in mind, because the media is not always correct. We found that in most cases, the media has not been correct, even up until this point. In fact, when I did my January webinar Zoom meeting I think it was first or second week in January, all the analysts predicted that it wouldn't go above 5% on the interest rates for mortgages. And what we found is Cynthia Drawn and others did not predict that we would have this type of change that we're encountering. So she's posting now, not a housing crisis, home ownership, home buying, recession does not equal a housing crisis. I agree with that philosophy. I do not think this, if we're going to call this a recession, I do not consider this a housing crisis. It definitely does not have the makings of 2008. And the reason for that is you can look at the home price change during the last 6 recessions. In 2020, 6%. It was 2008 where we had that recession, and it's nothing like 2008. So I like this graph for that reason. It's just very, very easy to understand for just the general home buyer or home seller that's kind of wondering, is the recession means pump the brakes? It does not mean pump the brakes. It means you think about things differently. Let's go to the next slide. These are the 2 links that I found pretty good. In fact, the Realtor.com just came out today. So those of you who are Realtor members might want to take the time and read it. Gave me some good information that you can pass along to buyers or sellers. If you want to click on it, Shannon, just go to the Realtor.com news trends. What I like is that no one saw it coming. How a housing market curveball has completely changed the way what buyers can expect in 2022. I think this is pretty much on target with what I thought. About 3 weeks ago, notice a significant change. Some of you I've talked to, if you've been in the office, I'm like, I could almost date and timestamp the moment we started to see this change of what they're now claiming here in the Realtor.com news on June 13th, which is today. I saw this and predicted this about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. I got 2 phone calls from 2, I would say, newish agents that have been in the market or been with Best Choice for 2+ years. So they're relatively new to real estate, and they called me and they asked me to help them with counteroffer. And I was like, oh, dang, I have not done a good job at training some of these agents who have been with us for 2 years as listing agents to understand how to do a counteroffer from a seller perspective. We are now starting to see some negotiation happening about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So we were on point to have this happen. But what's neat about this is that the median price point has not changed. I did several searches in various counties and also various areas that we service. And what we're finding is the pricing is remaining very, very firm and still improving. So we're not seeing the prices going down, but we are seeing interest rates moving up that is propelling buyers to maybe that have not looked in a while to see an opening for them to get into the housing market and actually get a good deal. So we are seeing some buyers that have not looked in 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, before the COVID, that are now back out on the hunt and finding success in getting their properties accepted or getting their offers accepted. So this kind of gives you some talking points on things you could share with a buyer about how they kind of curb their appetite for what we're experiencing in the mid of 2022. Let's go back to the next one, Shannon, on the Housing Wire. The Housing Wire article, this one came out June 8th. So this has been the start of June. Are home prices about to fall? My clients that are very much into the economy, I have clients that are economist professors. I've got some analytics that I work with on a regular basis. So I have to be up to speed on, what are the talking points and how do you really deal with these types of analytic people? And they brought this to my attention, and I think it's a great article that kind of goes through what the people in the know supposedly predicted and really what played out from 2012 onward. So we've been at Best Choice Realty, I like because it's 2012 when we formed the company, and we saw the inventory and what those talking heads would say about the shadow inventory and what the reality was. And I like how they kind of discuss that in graphs. You can certainly take a look at this later. And it's housingwire.com, and it talks about this. This was an article that was put together, what they said in 2014 and what really played out, what happened in 2015 and what really played out. So it's really the analysis that goes around what the talking heads predicted and what really came true. What I took from this article was that they can make a lot of articles about or use a lot of theory or even principles that just didn't hold weight. Who would have predicted we'd have COVID and that business would shut down for a period of time and that we'd get out of it very quickly and jobs would resume. Nobody predicted that. What do we need to see before prices fall? Talks about the supply and demand, and there are not the foreclosures that we expected coming out of COVID. And then also the credit scores still, and the amount of money that people have in their reserves. I don't think that really, they took that into account when they were kind of forecasting what the interest rates would do in January when we talked about that. So we really want to dig into supply a little bit more today, so you understand what a buyer's market is versus what a seller's market is. That way you'll understand the very end of the article a bit more. Shannon's scrolling through. There's some great graphs that you might want to snag, and obviously give proper attribution to those graphs if you're going to use them. But it might be an article that you might want to post on your social, or get familiar about talking about some of the things that they predicted in the past. And the reality is you guys are in the marketplace and you are controlling the narrative. So even when we were dealing with COVID and everything shutting down, we had to get ahead of it and control the narrative of we are actually back out working, so you do have the ability to do that and change the script. We'll talk about some ideas in a minute. Let's go to the next slide, Shannon. So those are two really good articles that you can pull. But we are seeing in the last 2.5, 3 weeks, we are seeing more contingencies on the rise in all of the counties. 22B, 22Q, people that need to sell their home in order to buy a home might want to get out there and start talking to those people. We are seeing some areas of the state that are accepting that, as well as we are seeing more 35s. I think that's increased in about 28%. We've seen an increase in utilization of 35 versus 35W. So it's a nice switch of pace for those buyers who are wanting to negotiate or wanting to have a little bit of more protection and not have the sellers call all the shots and we're waiving everything. We are also seeing Form 36 being utilized more. If you have not used a Form 36, it's a counteroffer. So there's negotiation where you may not get what you asked for. So make sure you set the proper expectations with your sellers. If you price at market value, you might just get one offer and you might have to negotiate on certain repairs or certain contingencies. We're seeing less 22 ADs. We're seeing much more negotiation of, Rochelle, should I use a 22A and use a 2A, or should I use a 2B? And my philosophy is always to use a 2B, because again, I think it's much more fair in the negotiation of taking your home off the market. I like that it's basically after day 21, the earnest money is non-refundable. So I'd like to see you guys use the 22A term 2B, whether you work with a buyer or whether you work with a seller. It is a negotiation point. It's a term that's negotiable on the 22A. And there's less waiver of financing. So if you are using a 22A, let's go ahead, whether you are representing a buyer or a seller, and get very confident at knowing that form and knowing what that form means, and getting those lenders on board with performing on that timeline. 21 days should be all that it takes to underwrite and make sure your buyer has got the financing that is in place. Involving vendors. So these are some hacks that I've come up with based on changes in the marketplace. You definitely want to be doing pre-inspections with your sellers. If you're working in King County, I'm seeing pretty much 80% of the listings going on and having pre-inspection loaded. So sellers basically are paying for the pre-inspection to eliminate that back and forth, or that elimination of the need for a 35. They most likely would be using 35W and using a seller procured inspection report. But you know what? That doesn't mean you couldn't use that strategy for other counties, eliminating the need for the back and forth with the 35W. I'm sorry, with the 35, having the back and forth negotiation that takes place. You might want to, if you have a home in good condition and you want to basically cut out some of the nonsense of the negotiation that goes between buyer and seller on the inspection, there is an appetite for pre-inspections to be done due to having less people coming through a property. That's kind of what was the product of COVID in King County, was less people coming through the property, meaning let's go ahead and get that pre-inspection, getting one inspector to come out to the property versus having 20 inspectors come out during that first weekend on the market. So I think that was something that's not going away. Including a home warranty. If you can't do a pre-inspection, maybe you want to offer a home warranty that will protect or make that buyer feel comfortable moving forward with that property, because a home warranty in essence would cover the property for 1 year. That's a great strong play, even for a buyer who's looking at, maybe we get the inspection, we do an as-is type of inspection where we're not asking for repairs, but then the buyer knows that, Rochelle Wilhite's going to go ahead and pay for a 1-year home warranty. That will often quash a lot of the fears that the buyer has about moving forward with a property one way or the other. Maybe they have limited to 2 properties and one of them, is being very firm about who can come and go through their property. The other one is vacant. And there's just this fear of like, well, I know I can't ask for a lot of repairs because it's got multiple offers, or maybe I'm the only offer, I'm asking for some stuff, but maybe I throw a home warranty and that solves that issue. As far as involving the lender, I see a lot of you not using the lender as much as you need to. As we shift into more of a balanced market or a buyer's market in some areas, you're going to want to use the lender more than you have ever, to make sure that your buyer is qualified, that you know how much closing costs are needed to fulfill the purchase. You're involving them in the marketing. Sometimes you may want to advertise buyer bonuses, or in the marketing remarks, advertise rather than doing a price reduction. Have the lender figure out what is the average closing costs that are needed, and maybe you offer that up in the marketing remarks rather than doing a closing or reducing the price. It could be less money to do that than it would be to lower the price $10,000. Might be better to do a $5,000 buyer bonus or $5,000 toward buyer's closing costs, say with a property that's sitting on the market longer than a couple of weeks and you're trying to move it. There's a strategy around doing that involving the lender. Another idea would be to use an appraiser. So some of you have some complicated properties. I had one back in May that had a detached shop, a substantial pool, in-ground pool, lots of it, almost close to nearly an acre, not a lot of comparables. And so the idea, and definitely a buyer a seller, they were in a situation where the husband and wife didn't come to terms with pricing. One thought that they knew more than the other. So we decided to go ahead and offer an appraisal in our marketing package. We just said, okay, we're not going to do a staging. You guys keep your furniture. Let's work with the, kind of a staging consultant, do some high-end photography, video work, make sure that we can properly advertise in all of the social media channels. But instead of offering the staging, like we would do for a full percentage, we offered full commission on this one. We offered to pay for the appraisal. Best thing that we could have done. We actually had the appraiser come in, do a full appraisal, full workup before we listed the property. And we identified that the appraisal came in at $859. Now, back in May, we still were seeing multiple offers and 22 ADs. In this case, we actually, as you can see, we got it sold for $915 with multiple offers. By the time it actually closed, or their appraiser came out, it appraised at $915. So we started to using appraisers or using vendors in a way to properly price and market homes to get what the seller wanted. Seller was very pleased. I think an appraiser could be used in other times where you maybe are not finding comparables, or you go back 3 months, you're like, dang, I just don't know. And the sellers are kind of like not sure about the price. You can certainly hire an appraiser. You just call them and say, hey, I need to hire you as an appraiser. It can be anywhere from $500 to $1,000, but that might be worth it if you are unable to do a CMA and actually come up with a valuation. Talk to me if you have concerns about how to do a CMA, because the next hack would be, gosh, if you're a buyer's agent and the property's been on the market for over, I'd say 10 days, probably want to do a buyer CMA. I mean, it seems like a basic concept, but some of you have never experienced this, where you actually need to do a CMA and you need to look at comparable properties to determine whether that listing agent properly priced the home. Did they overprice? Did they price at market value, or did they underprice? We're starting to see some sellers are having the right expectations, others are not. And if the property has not sold in, say, the first couple weekends, then you might want to do a buyer CMA if you're a buyer's agent, looking at, well, what can I realistically offer? And when you look at what can you realistically offer, get your buyer on board with offering maybe slightly between, don't be ridiculous and go 10 or 20% off of that price. Offer whatever you come up with a buyer CMA, but think about it from a point of negotiation. We can't just steal the house away from the seller, especially when the market has not shifted into a buyer's market, but we certainly can negotiate. And negotiation usually is around when a property is priced at market value, you usually can get anywhere from 3 to 6% off of that market valuation. So if you do a CMA, a buyer CMA, say a property goes on the market in your nearby neighborhood for $700,000, and you find out that the property should have been priced at $675,000, then go ahead and tell your buyer, let's offer 3% off of $675,000, and let's see if we can get the seller to agree to that. You're going to have more options to do that as we start to transition and start to change into a different marketplace. So get better at doing CMAs. Start practicing it. You have not done a CMA, take a class. The MLS, your local MLS will offer a CMA class. If you haven't done one in a while, you might want to see and get familiar with how to do it. We do offer cloud CMA. You can have your own cloud CMA account. You can talk to Shannon about that if you'd like your own cloud CMA account. We have a group rate that we can offer you, or you can use my CMA and it won't cost you anything. So if you want to use my cloud CMA, just let me know and I'll be happy to let you test it out until you're comfortable using that cloud CMA account. Most of the top producers that I can see are using some sort of cloud CMA or some sort of way to put all of the comparables in a nice, pretty fashion. Understand your market statistics. So I just did a quick snapshot on Northwest MLS. If you don't have Northwest MLS and you have a different MLS, most of the MLSs have some sort of statistical analysis that you can do. You want to understand whether you're in a buyer's market or a seller's market, and you probably want to drill down into your local area. I just did 3 zip codes and compared. Pretty easy to do. Took me less than 10 minutes to pop that into a graph. I went back 10 years, and as you can see, 98409 is pending. It's not all 3 of these zip codes, 98003, 98409, and 98390. One's Bonnie Lake, I believe, or Sumner. One is Tacoma, and one is Federal Way. So I was just comparing 3 different market areas. And what I can tell you is that everything under 2 months, this is months of supply, inventory, anything less than 2 months of supply is a seller's market. We are still in a seller's market in the, looks like 98390 and the 98003, but the 98409, it looks like we're creeping into more of a balanced market. Anything between 2 and 4 months of supply is a balanced marketplace where maybe we get to negotiate, maybe we get to see inspections, we get to see Form 35, maybe we get a little bit of closing costs paid for by the seller. So we're starting to see that in the 98409 area. If as far as it being a buyer's market, we're not there yet. You know, anything over 4 months in a residential marketplace would be considered a buyer's market, but we're not there. We are transitioning in some areas, so you want to probably know your market statistics and pull up your area of inventory and understand your inventory and what has appeared. We are in 98409, for example, we know that there is 28% more inventory week over week, and that's been consistent for the last 3 to 4 weeks. So you've got to know those kind of basic fundamentals of the marketplace so that you can properly speak to your buyers and your sellers on whether they should buy or whether they should sell. My answer is if you can sell, if you're ready to sell, let's sell now. If you're ready to buy, let's buy now. It does not matter on the interest rates, it's whether or not you can afford that monthly payment. So get people less focused on the interest rate and more focused about building financial wealth or getting themselves a home that will appreciate. Home appreciation has always been a good thing for me. Even in 2008, that also took longer to recover, but we saw appreciation after only a few years. We started to see that rebound. So real estate has always been a very good investment, a part of your investment portfolio. Let's go to the next slide. Another kind of a few different things I thought of that would work is we talked about buyer bonus versus price reduction. You might want to think about that. Depends on your seller, depends on your type of property. If you're a listing that's sitting on the market and you're sitting there going, gosh, what am I going to do? You might want to think about that, a buyer bonus versus a price reduction and figuring out what that needs to be. It could be less than doing a price reduction, how it's marketed and advertised. Price reduction to me signals you didn't price to begin correctly. So it definitely reflects differently than say a buyer bonus. You might want to think about how you market and advertise that. A built-in price reduction could be a strategy that you could use. If you're up against, say, multiple agents that are going up for a listing, and the listing agent, the seller is like, well, Rochelle, I want to hire you, but you're thinking my home is worth 700 when I think my home is worth 800. And this Redfin agent has told me my house is worth 810 because Redfin can't calculate and calibrate the pending sales correctly or the marketplace in general in a specific area. So I want to go with you, Rochelle, but I mean, I just can't leave a lot of money on the table. So you're dealing with an objection of price from the listings. So the way to deal with that would be to go ahead and the list price would be $799, $990. Okay, so we'll go with your idea, right, Mr. or Mrs. Seller. But after 14 days, the seller agrees to reduce the price to $775. You can build in a price reduction on your listings by using a Form 18. Many of you have learned this strategy maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago when the market was different. And some of you have never learned this concept. So this might be some form you might want to screen capture this little slide here, because that's how you would write it up on a Form 18. In fact, back in the day, we used to do several different strategies, even with the bank foreclosures, where I had like 5 different areas where after 21 days, after 30 days, after 45 days, after 90 days, we would build in price reductions so that we could get to that sweet spot of where the marketplace was willing to bear. You may want to consider this in dealing with an objection from a seller who's not comfortable listing with you because they, in their head, think their home is worth $799. And you can prove to them after only 2 weeks on the marketplace that their number is not realistic, and you will need to do a price reduction, and then at some point you will get that property sold. So this is one way to do that, as a built-in price reduction on a Form 18. Next slide. Cancellation. So I'm hearing a lot of you going, oh, my seller, they overshot it and they want to cancel and relist. If you have a seller in that category, just remind them that the days on market counter continues to continue counting. if they take it off the market, they have to be off the market for 60 days in order for the counter to stop counting and then start at day 0. So if they think, oh, I'm going to just cancel and put it on the market with a different MLS number, there may be fines associated with doing that with your local association or MLS, but you definitely want to make sure that you keep that seller. In order to keep that seller, because you have a listing agreement where they've already signed a 1A with us to agree to sell for 3 months and they want to cancel early, always be sure you get a Form 52 signed. It's a conditional release of the listing. And the cancellations must be signed by the broker, and they need to be signed by the seller in order to accompany that release of the listing. It basically says that for 6 months, they would owe us a commission if one of those buyers came to fruition. They still would owe us a commission. So it definitely keeps that seller focused on the prize and not just all of a sudden changing their mind and then wanting to do something different with another agent. So make sure that they're signing a Form 52 in addition to the Form 19. Next slide. And then at the end of the day, home appreciation still wins. I think that you're going to need to set the right expectation with your sellers. They are not going to be seeing appreciation like we've seen in the last couple of years, but we still are seeing appreciation. That's the focus. You want to keep them focused on that. Tell them the story about how you bought a home, or tell them about a client that you helped. I'd rather see stories about that than having the media control the narrative on social, or in how you communicate with your buyers or sellers. And they're hearing and they're seeing this on the news, or as they're in the grocery store hearing about this or that, or oh my gosh, can you believe inflation? You guys control the narrative. I'd rather hear about somebody that was in the office that said they got an offer accepted on a house, 10,000 less, and they basically were able to sell their home and get their home under contract and be able to move into a house that's twice the size of their home. Those stories are the stories I want to hear about. I want to hear about that one where they had the house in the market at $900,000 and they dropped the price $50,000 and they still didn't get an offer. And then you swooped in and then got an offer accepted, and then it appraised, at the original price because of the way you negotiate, the way you handled the offer process. I want to hear about stories like that. And I think we can control the narrative if you put some time and energy around doing some research, looking at your market statistics in your local area or wherever your clients are looking, being very familiar with a few things, and then changing the narrative, being the change that needs to involving, a lender, appraiser, whoever you need to involve us here in the office to help you understand that narrative, and then change the script. It doesn't have to be what the media portrays. In fact, if you look at that housing wire, the media was wrong on all of those instances from 2012 on. So I think what we can learn from this is that you're in the housing industry, you see the numbers, you control how buyers think and operate, when they make decisions, when they don't. So less about the inflation. So that's the moral of the story tonight. Less about inflation and how inflation, but tell us how we move forward. What does the future look like in real estate? What do those values come in at? What is that story of that homeowner that got bid out a year ago, and now they found the house of their dreams? Or they went just 20 miles outside of their circle of where they were looking and they found a fantastic deal. Or they were able to negotiate with the seller and have their closing costs paid for. Or work with a lender to get some of that closing costs paid for with a grant. Those are the kinds of stories that we need to see and hear about, and less about inflation, because houses are kind of fundamental to the home ownership and to the American dream, honestly. And it's been something that has served me well since I was a teenager, by actually buying and investing and selling, buy low, sell high. That's a philosophy that works really well. And even in this marketplace, it's a great time to buy. I ended up buying a property out in Idaho, and I got a fantastic deal on it. So you just have to know where to look and how to negotiate and how to communicate. Communication is part of negotiation. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that came in. Shannon, you want to open it up?
Yeah, I don't think we had very many questions, but I'll run through the chat here real quick. John Catalano had a comment where he says, my listing is 10 days old, it's competitively priced, and there's only one showing. So are others seeing no showings as well? And I think I will say yes, John, that you're not the only one. There's other people that are in those types of boats too. I know I've had at least several phone calls about that over either today or last week as well, where people are having very small amounts of showings or no showings. And even though they are competitively priced. So I think using some of the tactics that Rochelle showed here today might be helpful, or just reevaluating the direction might be something to consider.
I mean, I think it takes about a couple weeks. When I did a market analysis to see kind of when price reductions were happening, especially, I think yours is in Vancouver, if I'm right. I mean, don't jump too soon. Sometimes you just need more time. Somebody asked Shannon, I think over the weekend, should I do a price reduction? And she'd only been on the market, was it 6 days?
Well, yeah, so she listed on a Saturday, which is already, you're listing on the weekend. The prime selling days are always going to be on the weekends. And I told her, I was like, you're only 4 days on the market, 5 days on the market. I was like, you haven't even gone a full weekend, like a full weekend, Saturday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was like, go a couple more days and then call me if you don't sell it. So I haven't heard from her yet. So I'm assuming it's sold. Yeah. But yeah, before you hit the panic button, you might want to reevaluate the days on market for the area.
Yeah, look at the days on market for the area, and then also consider that your 2 weeks, you need a full 2 weeks before you want to do anything. That's just the law of how the inventory, how things lose its kind of excitement. If you look at that graph on time on market, it's usually about day 14 or 15 when you start to see whether your marketing efforts has taken effect or whether you need to do an adjustment. So that doesn't matter. That holds true in any type of market, in a buyer's market, in a seller's market, or in a balanced market. That time on market, you got to give yourself 2 weeks at least on that. Yeah. So don't jump too fast, John. Hold the ground and see. But you should be getting, if you are priced right and you are marketed right, you should be getting at least a few showings. So that shows me that there's a little bit more work we need to do, on that, and that you probably would be posed for doing something different if you don't get more showings this weekend coming up.
Yeah, and I know I had a couple questions this last week. They were asking about what else can I do to sell it other than just reducing the price. I think too, one of the biggest rule of thumbs that we both have experience whenever we've had to do a price reduction is that instead of just doing the price reduction, change something else in the listing as well. A lot of photographers that are out there, they give you several different types of front photos. Change it up, change the front photos, adjust the marketing remarks at the same time that you're doing the price reduction, so that when buyers see it again, that may have already gotten that listing before, they think, oh, that looks a little different. Maybe it just appealed to them, the different lighting, who knows? But do something like that in addition to that, I would say. Let's see. Yay, inspections. I know a lot of people are really excited about these inspection contingencies are coming back, which is kind of good to see. And Tristan had a comment about, I've always heard 3 to 6 months being a neutral market and 6 or more being a buyer's market. Has it changed in recent times? I'm assuming he's meaning the months of supply. What would you say, Rochelle?
Yeah, I mean, you're right there, give or take. If you throw in some commercial, yeah, I mean, that could be, when you throw in some multifamily, that inventory supply, the 3 to 6 could hold true. But in residential, it's always been 2 to 4 of a balanced market or neutral market. Anything above 4 tends to be more buyer's market. So Tristan, you're not totally off. You're right there too. 3 to 6, you could say, is also balanced. Shannon, anything else?
And I think, I think that's all the questions we had.
I see use less of showing time, you guys too. I mean, if you can, because I think some of the brokers, they never liked showing time. I mean, as far as that goes, I know it's easy on some of you that are trying to organize the amount of showings, but it makes it difficult. And you also have, people that don't like to use that technology, that just want to.
Well, I think too, you're showing your cards in some respects. People can see how many showings that are going on that weekend. Yeah. So, as a listing agent and as a buyer's agent, if I look on there and I say, oh, this is a fresh listing, there's only one showing this entire weekend. Okay.
I know.
Game on.
Yeah. So if you're a listing agent, I may not want to use showing time. And I think that might be better. It's just going back to the way what we used to do, right? Which is calling and scheduling and making that arrangement, having those conversations and having that communication. It goes a long way, rather than letting technology try to take over. When you have less showings, you can manage those showings, and there's a way to connect with people better, right? And I know that Angelica's got a listing out in West Seattle. It's like, I would rather pick up the phone and know Angelica's going to show that property and tell her how great the property is, right? And let's have a conversation about the property and what she needs to keep in mind when she's showing that West Seattle property. Make sure you show it or close the gate, or, if you take them there, just, go through, go off of, 15th Avenue rather than going through, the different street, and kind of walking them through what the highlights are, of that property. I mean, we go back to the basics, the fundamentals of negotiation and communication, really, when we get into this type of marketplace.
Yeah, because the buyers too, it's like when you're having those conversations with listing agents and you're saying, oh yeah, they replaced the electrical panel last year, they put a new roof a couple of years ago. I mean, some of that stuff may not be in the listing, and that will be helpful for your buyers even.
Yeah.
To have that type of information on hand. It just gives you more credibility and more rapport.
No, that's great. I think that's it for today, unless there's any other questions. You can unmute your line, *6 if you want to mute. But I honestly say I'm busier than I ever have been. So if you're wanting to have much more fun in real estate, it's when the market starts to get like this, where you have buyers and sellers coming out of the woodwork and asking you about real estate. So it's much better for some of you who have been beaten out or beaten up, got black eyes. Hang tight, it's coming. There's more inventory coming, and the more opportunity for you to do some sales. Very exciting times.
I had a quick question. Will this be posted on the YouTube channel? Beautiful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And I know some of those links, we go quite fast. For those of you who are showing us, we go quick for 30 minutes, and then you got to pick up sometimes after if I go too fast. All right.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have a great week. Next week we will have, I believe, Shannon, accountant. Is that right?
Yeah. Next week we've got a CPA that's joining us on our Zoom meeting. So for those of you that are thinking about, or maybe have filed an extension this year, might be time to kind of involve a CPA. So we'll have some questions that we can ask him, or involve him on some of our businesses to get some advice. So stay tuned for next Monday for that.
All right. Have a great week.